everybody. Welcome to a special fan bus PSR. It's kind of a collaboration we're doing, right? We're doing a kind of a whiskey around the world tasting, our first live event, which is crazy awesome. And I'm super excited because I have all my homies with me. I don't know how this happens, but I'm like so lucky to meet the coolest, most fun, awesome people. Sitting next to me here, this is one of my BFFs, Chris. And she's a designer friend of mine. Chris, how are you?
I'll be even more fabulous once we
In
start
a couple
tasting.
minutes. I'm like lucky because I have girlfriends who enjoy doing these kinds of things. Just a few, and she's one of them. So also joining us, we have Will from Game On. Will, how are things?
Going great. Excited to try some delicious looking whiskey.
I know. I'm excited too. Very much so. So, and also we have Jay Tilly. It says Jay Tilly, but I know him as JT and Ellie Jair from the No Shave Man Cave. How are you boys today, gents?
Outstanding.
Men?
Ready to start sipping on some whiskey.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
Awesome.
I was like, yeah, these guys totally have to come on after, especially since our last podcast adventure together. I was like, these guys need to be there for sure. And our host with the absolute most, Andy Pace, our executive bourbon steward, right? Whiskey sommelier,
Scotch whiskey sommelier. Yep. And executive bourbon steward.
How are you, sir?
I am fantastic. As I said pre-show, it's a wonderful night to drink whiskey. Any night is a wonderful night to drink whiskey, so I'm very happy to do it here with friends.
I'm totally stoked. So Andy and I know each other from a totally like the design world, actually. And Chris, you're familiar with Andy too in that way.
Yes.
So which is super cool and weird, but I really hadn't known that Andy was all into these sorts of things until he and I are part of a special sports group. And so that's kind of how I learned about that. It was kind of cool when it's like worlds colliding, my design world and my bourbon world colliding, which is super cool. I love that. And Andy, of course, did a podcast with me on the fan bus specifically about these kinds of things. So I'm going to turn it over to Andy and he can kind of guide us through what we're going to be doing tonight together. And hopefully anybody watching this live or on a replay will be able to learn a little bit of something. And we are always talking about how sometimes people don't know what to do with their whiskey, how to drink whiskey, how to drink scotch, how to drink bourbon, those kinds of things. And really at the end of the day, Andy had devised to me that there is no wrong way to do that, period. End of story, as long as you're exploring. So Andy, welcome.
Excellent.
Take us on an adventure.
I will do my best. Thanks again for having me. This is an absolute pleasure for me to do. I've been doing whiskey tasting events for going on about 10 years now. And, I like to start out letting everybody know kind of what my journey was into whiskey. And I'll do it briefly because I really want to get feedback from everybody else. My journey into whiskey was I was in my early 20s. I just got... and I was a beer drinker, and I still love beer, but it doesn't love me as much as it used to. And so I remember I was involved in a commercial architectural association. I just got elected to be president of the organization, and so all these industry experts and been in the industry, been in architecture for 40 years. They're coming up to me afterwards and congratulating me. And they asked to buy me a drink. And so I wasn't going to be that, typical kid from Wisconsin and asking for a Miller Lite. And so I scoured the back of the bar and I saw a bottle of whiskey. I didn't know what it was. And it was called Dewar's White Label. And I said, I'll have one of those on the rocks with a splash of water. I wanted to sound cool because I was a young kid and I was, and so, and lo and behold, I actually loved it. And that was my first foray into whiskey. I'd never really drank it before, besides some college parties that I don't really remember. And so I fell in love with Scotch whiskey, actually. That was my first foray into whiskey. And then fast forward till about 2012, 2011, my next door neighbor, who's one of my best friends in the world, he is a Scotch whiskey lover, and he had a heck of a collection in his basement. We'd go over to his house and just taste whiskeys. And we were asked by a friend to conduct a tasting event, and he and I did it. It went so well, we decided to make kind of a fun business out of it. So we ended up going to Scotland a few times and getting our sommelier certificate, and the rest is history. So that's my foray into whiskey. Now, everybody here, who is a regular whiskey drinker? And what I mean by that is, if you go into a bar or restaurant, your first choice is either a whiskey or a whiskey-based mixed drink.
Oh yeah.
2, 3, some, half, a little bit. Okay. And so that's good that we have some folks here who have experience and some that aren't necessarily whiskey drinkers. So that's great. And that's why I love to do what we're doing tonight, which is what's called a Whiskey Around the World tour. I think
Can we do a quick poll? What does everybody order when you do go? If you do order it or not, just real quick.
I'll start. I'll either do an old fashioned or just a whiskey on the rocks.
Okay.
Or just a whiskey straight.
How do you take your old fashioned?
However they'll give it to me.
He's in Florida, so that's in Wisconsin. It's a whole thing.
Really?
We get into that. That's pretty interesting.
Oh, okay.
All right. What about you, Jared?
Yeah, I really like Manhattans or old fashions, and the old fashioned that I like is with the preferably smoked, but I'm not going to push it away if it's not. A little bit of orange, and then just a little dash of bitters, and I'm in it to win it. So
cool,
nice.
Well, what about you?
I just get neat.
Okay, whatever the flavor is of the day.
Yeah, I'm not picky.
Okay, awesome.
I go.
I get neat as well, but sometimes I'll start with vodka.
Oh yeah, that's nothing.
Just because I don't want to do, neats all night long.
It's not so neat by the time
it's
you're
not
done.
Neat the next morning. Nothing's neat the next morning.
Very good. I just wanted to know. So okay.
Excellent.
Continue, Andy.
No, that's good. That's a good variety, and especially if you're drinking bourbons and American whiskeys and ryes and so forth, Manhattans and old fashions are just wonderful for that. They pair perfectly with those types of drinks. So on a Whiskey Around the World tour, what we're going to do is we're going to start in Ireland, because that's where whiskey really started back in the 9th century, when with the trade of spices and perfumes, the Muslims brought the technology of distilling to Ireland or to the Irish, and so they took it back to their country, and with typical Irish, well, let's see if we can drink it, and see what happens. And so they were taking their beer or their mead, whatever they were making at the time, and they decided to distill it. And they came out with a spirit that was at the time called aqua vitae. And aqua vitae is Latin for the water of life. And so from Scotland,
I love that.
From Scotland, it was from Ireland, it was brought to Scotland. And so where the Irish really started it, the Scots really perfected it. And so in Scotland, it was known in Scottish Gaelic as Ushkava, and Ushkava is essentially Gaelic for the water of life. And as time went on, and as they started speaking King's English instead of Scottish Gaelic, it turned into from Ushkava to Uske, and then to the word whiskey. And that's where we got the term whiskey from.
How beautiful. I love that.
So,
looks like Skip joined the chat. Hey, Skip. Good evening. Okay, keep going.
So we're going from Ireland to Scotland, then to the United States. And with the United States, when the Scots moved to the United States in the 1800s, they brought along with it the desire to distill their aqua vitae, or their whiskey. And then we're going to take some detours from that point. So I sent you all small bottles, and I purposely didn't tell you the names of anything, because I didn't want to have any preconceived notions of what we were drinking tonight. So bottle number 1 is an Irish whiskey. And now, if you've ever done a whiskey tasting before, just a couple of quick points. First of all, we always want to taste whiskey for the first time neat. All right. Tasting it neat just gives you a baseline of where you want to go from there. It also allows you to extract most of the aromas and the flavors and so forth that the distiller is trying to provide to you. Now, from that, we add a drop of water, maybe a little bit more water, and then we can do ice and do mixed drinks and so forth. And so, as I said last time, Angela, the fact is that there's no wrong way to drink whiskey. You drink whiskey the way you like it. The Japanese drink theirs with green tea. The woman who gave me my sommelier certificate, she's from Poland, and she drinks her whiskey with lemonade. That's just the way they do it in different cultures. And so there is no wrong way. Anybody who tells you you can't drink whiskey this way is just, they're trying to sound important. So you drink it the way you like to drink it.
I love that. Looks like Jonah joined us. Hey, Jonah. Sue, Sally's here. Hi, Sally. I'm excited to get started.
Did you all get a chance to pour out the whiskeys?
Yes.
Yes, they're
Okay,
breathing.
Great. All right. So take glass number one or bottle number one. This is an Irish whiskey. So this is the way whiskey was first produced in Ireland. It's called a single pot still. All right. A pot still whiskey is unique. It's only made this way in Ireland. What a pot still whiskey is, it takes both malted barley and unmalted barley in the mash. And that's what gives you some really bright notes, some floral notes, even sometimes some oily notes. And the first thing to do is just to bring it up to your nose, not take a huge whiff because you don't want to burn your olfactories. You want to, enjoy the aroma. And notice how you're pulling things out just from the nose. Things like spicy, maybe nutty, floral notes. That's coming from the green barley or the unmalted barley that gets tossed into the mash. All right, and so then it's just a matter of just giving it a swirl, opening up some of those aromas, and give it a hit on the palate. Now, this is a 12-year-old whiskey, and so the key is you normally want to keep it on your palate in seconds for as many years in the bottle. So we want to keep this in the mouth for about 12 seconds for the first taste. All right. Oh, that's good. This is probably one of my all-time favorite Irish whiskeys. It's the Redbreast 12-year-old.
So good.
Good.
So
That is
good.
really good.
I mean,
that down.
Your mouth is watering. It's like so good.
I went to a distillery one time with, I think I was in California, and is there a different, like one of the guys was smelling with his mouth open and one was smelling with his mouth closed, like when they were serving it to us? Is there a significance to that?
Yeah, typically when I'm doing either tasting or like judging, I'll do it mouth open, because if it's a whiskey I've never had before or I don't know what it is, mouth open actually allows you to get a little more flavor out of the nosing process.
And that in turn allows you to pick up different profiles, flavors.
That's correct. That's correct. And here's the other thing too. There is absolutely no better way to taste whiskey than in a room full or even in a Zoom chat full of friends. And you always want to taste a new whiskey and bounce flavors off of people. Like, what did you get out of it? I got some caramel. I got some, I got some hay flavors. I got some apricot, whatever the case may be. It allows you to think of those words yourself. A lot of times it's difficult to pull those flavors out unless somebody else is able to come up with the word.
Yeah. Like when I was nosing this and then whatever I was smelling, but took a taste. And then once I went back to it now, I'm smelling it. Like for me, I smell a little bit of like caramel or something.
Yes. Yeah. And so what happens is the longer it's in the glass, and the longer it has a chance just to mix with oxygen in the air, you start to get a little more of those base notes that come through. You get more of the cask. So that's where you get that flavor, the wood flavors that are extracted.
So
your
I wanted
caramels, vanillas.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I'll never, ever, 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 ever forget the first time that I had scotch. And you and I talked about this on my podcast about how it was like, it was literally a whole body experience. Like, it was just shy of a religious experience because I like took a sniff, had some, whatever, like, but when I drank it, and then like it just totally like I got the shivers. I got that warm sensation, right? What you call the Kentucky hug.
Mhm.
So awesome. I love that. So like my nose opened up and it just was like wild. So it was like it wasn't just me drinking a beverage. Like I had like a reaction from my whole body from my head to my feet. I swear to God, it was just wild. Anybody
Well,
else
I
think
think
that? They had it, or not just me?
no, I think that's pretty common to have people describe like their first experience with a whiskey that really knocked their socks off, because it is like a whole body experience, and that's what's so enjoyable about it.
I got some sort of like it was like 3 or 4 seconds after I swallowed it, like a little extra kick of I don't know if it was vanilla or something, but it was really good. Really good. I like that. What is this called again?
This is called Redbreast, and it's their 12-year-old.
That's
And,
me after a really long day at the beach.
Can you cuddle, Andy?
I get sunburned so bad.
That's the
Redbreast 12-year, you said.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, if you can find the Redbreast 12-year-old cask strength, that's a real find. That's probably one of my favorite Irish whiskeys of all time. And this one comes in at about 40% ABV. Cask strength comes in at 59, I believe. A couple things about Irish whiskey. First of all, Irish whiskey is unique in that it's distilled 3 times. It's a triple distillation. Bourbon is typically distilled once. Scotch is distilled twice, and Irish is distilled 3 times. That is typical. There are some outliers in the industry, but for the most part, that is very similar.
Is this it? Just letting the viewers get a look. Perfect.
That is it.
Good job. Will over here doing God's work. Way to go.
Doing a little producing, you know.
Very good.
Behind the scenes.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right now, so.
I know. I'm like, I'm getting like a schoolgirl.
And so also about Irish whiskey can be made with just about any grain. Single pot still has to be made with malted barley and unmalted barley only, but whiskey can be made essentially from any grain. We'll talk about that as we move along.
Nice. Sweet.
All right. And so if anybody still has anything left in the glass, I ask you to put just a drop of water in it. All right.
Okay.
Now,
I'm just going to show you that this girl, she came
with a dropper.
Yeah, and I'm like,
beautiful.
Yeah. You got
I'm a
That's
mother,
fabulous.
so I'm like kind of I'm like,
Where'd
no,
you use
no.
that?
Okay, so just a drop.
Just a drop. Yeah. And you wouldn't think it would make a big difference, but what it does is when you add water to whiskey, and this is why I think you always have to add water to whiskey after you tasted something for the first time neat. When you add water to whiskey, what happens is the water and the alcohol start to sort of, combat each other in the glass. It actually is a heating effect where it heats up the alcohol ever so slightly because of the chemical composition of the glass. And so it actually starts to now release water soluble aromas that wouldn't be released unless you hit it with a little bit of water. Now, when I do these tastings in person, I'll actually turn off all the lights and I'll take a flashlight and flash it up against the bottom of the glass up onto the ceiling. And you'll actually see the movement of the whiskey when you put that little bit of water in it because of that chemical reaction.
Wow.
And now smell it again. I don't want to say it's a different profile, but it certainly brightened things up or made things bigger.
You can definitely caramel smell.
Yeah, it's sweeter smelling to me.
Right. And so
I tasted
with a whiskey
I tasted a little bit of citrus. Sorry about that, Andy. I tasted some kind of citrus note with the water that I didn't taste before. So that's pretty cool.
I get that too. That's a good pull. you know, it's interesting. Whiskeys that are about 40 to 46% don't normally pair very well with water, but just adding that drop, that's all you need to do. It doesn't really water the whiskey down at all. It just causes that reaction.
That's amazing.
And so what'll happen is after about 15, 20 minutes, that'll go away. It'll actually go back to where it was before. And so you can always, you know, add another drop to sort of intensify it.
It's
Wow.
typically on in 15 to 20 minutes.
That's a wonderful pour. And so that, again, that's one of my favorite Irish whiskeys of all time. And it's available just about anywhere you go. Liquor stores, a lot of bars have it.
Huzzah. Love it.
Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned Dewar's White Label, and that was the first whiskey I ever had.
Oh.
And I was a
Wow.
teenager. And so my experience wasn't an out of body. It was a, if you've ever seen anyone get electrocuted, I was just like, and it took me a couple of days to like process what it was. And then I went and talked to my brother, and he was like, oh yeah, that was the, you know, the ethanol or whatever is what you were experiencing. And then I tried it again, and my cheeks turned bright red like I was one of Santa's elves. And I was like, all right, whiskey's not for me. And I went on this beer journey through my Marine Corps career. Anytime I went somewhere, I was like, hey, do you have a local beer? Hey, do you have a local beer? You being from Wisconsin, or talking about Wisconsin, the Spotted Cow.
Oh yeah.
Try and get my hands on that every year. But yeah, I absolutely love just having a drink, although I drink many, a whiskey drink or a bourbon drink, and just like JT and I will get the boys together, and we call it the Triple B. It's bourbon, barbecue, and body slams, and we just hang out, barbecue, watch wrestling, and have a little sippy sip.
Yep.
Ah, it's beautiful.
A little slippy slip. We killed like a whole 2 bottles the last time we did it.
When it's good, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right. So we all thought that number 1 was pretty good, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was good.
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're going to move on to number 2. Now we go from Ireland to Scotland. Remember, whiskey was brought over to Scotland 14th century. And when whiskey was starting to be produced in Scotland, you have to remember that single malt whiskeys didn't exist. You know, back then it was blends, because the blends were the only thing that really sold. You know, it took a good blender, somebody like a Johnny Walker, or you know, a McCoy, where the term real McCoy came from, to put together a blend that every time they tasted it tasted the same. And the problem before that was they were making whiskey, and it just always turned out different because they couldn't keep the same flavor profile. They didn't have enough technology back in the day. And so they would create blends, and good blenders used to be tea blenders. They were in the tea blending business. So they knew flavor profiles, and they started doing the same thing with whiskeys, and they came out with the blends that we know today. This one is a different blend, and so I decided to go to a blend for our first taste in Scotland, because that's the way it was done originally. This one is called the Sassenach. Now, I don't know if there's any fans of the series Outlander with us today, but Outlander is a series on, I think, Stars, and it's involving people from 18th century Scotland, and one of the main characters, and his name is James Fraser. He's an actor named Sam Hoogan, and Sam developed his own whiskey blend a couple of years ago called the Sassenach, and Sassenach is Scottish Gaelic for outsider, so that's where it comes from. This is one of the best blends I've ever had. That's it. That is it. Absolutely one of the best blends I've ever had. And I'm not one of these whiskey snobs that says you have to only drink single malt Scotch. I think there are blends out there that are just as good, if not better, than most single malts. Matter of fact, I did a tasting event a couple years ago called "Blends Are Your Friends," and
That was really good. I like that one.
this is, it gives you a lot of the same potency as a single malt, but it kind of tamps down. It's like taking all the slides on an equalizer and kind of put them in the middle, right? So you don't have, it's not too sharp or too low. It's a really good middle of the road whiskey. This one's going to be kind of fruity, a little bit of orange. You got that caramel in there, the cinnamon in there.
Oh yeah.
It almost had like a spicy pepperish something or other. Yeah, that gave me the little
I do get
I guess
orange.
it was the Scottish hug, which could be a finishing move in a wrestling match. But hey,
Right?
This one
Yeah, that
definitely
one's-
hits.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's way different.
Yeah.
For sure. This one's going to be a true Scottish blend. So it's going to have both malted barley and other grains. So when you find a grain whiskey, you're never really told what grains they use. It could be corn, rye, wheat, spelt, you name it. And so grain whiskey has a much softer profile to it. And so they blend that with some single malts.
Yeah, I
I
get a lot of citrus. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
citrus, I get the spice.
Mm-hmm.
I almost get like a vegetal note.
This one's weird because it smells different than it tastes, if that makes sense. Like
Yes.
smelling it, I was expecting something else, and then I taste it. I'm like, oh, that's why I keep kind of going back. I'm like, did I pick up the right one?
Yeah.
Because I smelled almost like the caramel instantly, but I don't taste it as heavy as I did in the other one, which I didn't smell as much caramel. So it's interesting.
It's weird
It
because
is,
this
and
one I
that's-
smell more of this citrus
Me too.
than
Yeah.
I did the last
Oh,
one.
that's so weird. Everybody's different, I guess.
and
Yeah.
it's a lot
Yeah, but-
lighter. If you
It
look
is
at the
lighter.
other, it's a lot lighter. I guess, is that the blend? Is that what makes it lighter? Or
Yeah, typically, I mean, just like bourbon whiskey, you're usually getting colors that are coming from the cask itself. And so a lot of it has to do with
Makes
the
sense.
type of wood that they use. All whiskey is originally aged in oak, a kind of oak. In Europe, they use a lot of European oak, which is softer, has a much softer profile than American oak. That's why American oak is so highly sought after worldwide. As we get into the next one, which is going to be a bourbon, bourbon is always aged first in a new unused charred oak barrel. After those barrels have been used, they usually get sent over to Scotland to be used to age Scotch whiskey.
Oh.
Aha.
But so that's how you get different flavor profiles with Scotch. Bourbon is I don't want to say it's single dimensional, but it doesn't have as many facets to it as Scotch does, because in Scotland you're allowed to use a variety of casks for those different flavors. In the United States, you're not allowed to.
Yeah, and didn't you kind of said too, like as a blanket statement, that most bourbon drinkers like almost all bourbons because they're all so very similar that there's not
Yeah.
huge nuances between maker to maker.
Yeah, there's with bourbon whiskey, it's predominantly corn, which is what makes it bourbon, a legal bourbon. It's at least 51% corn in the mash bill. And corn has a very unique yet singular profile. It's very sweet, and all bourbons will have that profile to it. So you taste anywhere from here to here on the profile scale. Scotch whiskey, even though it all uses malted barley, you're allowed to use different types of casks in the process, and so your taste profile just really gets expanded.
Nice.
Now,
I have a hard
this
time
one's a little-
describing what I'm tasting here with it, but I just know my taste buds like it.
nice. A lot of honey. I get a lot of honey on this one.
Oh, honey.
Yep.
as
I don't know
soon
if
as you said that, I was trying to figure out what that underlying, and then I put a little bit of water in it. I was like, what the hell is that? And then the second you said honey, I was like,
Water.
there we go.
Yeah.
Honey, definitely. Wow.
And to me, water really opens this one up.
Right.
All right, I'm gonna try it with the water now.
And
So
so
is
when
he
I
still-
added water to it, I'm getting raisin, I'm getting almonds.
Oh,
I mean, some really, really wide flavors.
I smell it differently now.
I'm getting this happy feeling.
Yeah,
I
usually
know.
happens after round 2. Yeah, yeah.
Can you look at the back of the bottle as happy an ingredient? No, it's a
Like,
result.
working hard in here.
I think
Yeah, I
happy is
think-
always the first ingredient.
Pretty good. I get that.
I like it with a couple drops of water.
Okay,
I do.
excellent. And so this one is also good because blends make really good highball drinks. And so a highball is basically, a couple ounces of whiskey over on the rocks, and then you top it off with club soda. And that is a typical Scotch whiskey drink, a highball. And this whiskey, because of those floral notes, the honey notes, the vanillas, the cinnamons, the raisins, makes a really good highball.
I like it.
Yeah, I'm gonna definitely go grab this heading into the weekend. This is gonna be on
Oh
tap.
yeah,
He's
We'll get some-
your boy. He can be
we
like,
got
"Damn, Dad, you're so smart."
And we got a couple pay-per-views this weekend too, so we can do 2 nights of bourbon barbecue and body slams.
I like it.
Nice. Very good.
It smells totally different too.
Yeah.
Yeah, the water really opens that one up. It's almost like
Yeah.
a different drink. The first one I noticed a little. This one I definitely can tell the
Yeah,
difference.
like
Mhm.
you were saying, the smell is different from the taste.
Yeah,
I was telling Angela, like, I couldn't really smell it.
She's
in the
like, I can't
beginning.
smell it. Like, did you burn your nose the first time?
I like it.
Excellent. Well, here's the thing too about drinking whiskey is that whiskeys that are designed to be consumed like this, where you're actually really wanting to taste it. You're not just drinking it for the sake of drinking it. You want to taste it. You can close this bottle up and come back to it 6 months later, and it's going to be different, a little bit different. And sometimes that improves the flavor of whiskey. Sometimes it doesn't. But you can experiment with that, because the nice thing about whiskey is that, unlike a bottle of wine, open up a bottle of wine, you got to drink it right away. Scotch whiskey, I've had bottles that are open for 10, 15 years, and I'm still taking sips of here and there, and it never spoils, it never gets bad. It does oxidize, it does change the flavor profile a little bit, but it still is going to be 98% of where it was straight out of the bottle.
Yeah.
I think Andy needs company if he's had bottles for
Oh yeah.
years old.
I'm sure he's got a long list of people
I mean,
waiting.
if-
Andy,
if you could send them down
Well-
here, it'd be fine. Yeah, send them our way. We'll kill them out for you.
Yeah. I think I have something like now about 450 or 500 bottles of whiskey,
Holy cow.
and I would say probably about 100 of them are open.
Wow.
And so I was given the directive that you cannot open another one until you finish some. And so, darn it.
As per Valerie, is that the way
As
that
per-
works?
Yep, as per the boss. Yes.
Nice.
All right. So we all like number 2, I take it.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Now you'll notice, between number 1 and number 2, there was a different flavor profile. You went from all barley to a blend of barley and grain. Number 3 is going to be completely different than the last 2. Number 3 is when Scotch whiskey came to the United States. And when Scotch came to the United States and the Scots wanted to make it, they didn't have barley. They didn't have that grain here in the States. They had rye and they had corn. The first whiskeys made in the U.S. were actually a rye. But for this case, I wanted to showcase a bourbon. And because I think this is one of my favorite bourbons to pour out when people say they're real bourbon lovers. Okay. Not because of the cost of it. It's only $55-$60 a bottle, but because of what a punch it packs. This one is called the 1792 Full Proof. This one's made by Barton Distillery in Bardstown, Kentucky. This one's coming in at 62.5% ABV.
Which 1792 did you say that one was?
This is the full proof.
Okay. So why did a majority of them, why do the best bourbons or most of the bourbons come from Kentucky? I know like a lot of the wines are based on the temperature. You can taste if it's hotter or colder, or it, depending on what kind of grape it is or whatever. But why did everybody end up in the bluegrass state and not here in Florida with me? I don't understand.
That's a really good question. I'm glad you asked that. A lot of the flavor profile, not a lot, but enough of that's an influence, comes from what's called the terroir, which is very similar to wine. Where is it grown? What type of climate is it? What type of soil does it have? And with the case of whiskey, it's not necessarily where the grain comes from, but it's how the spirit is stored. Those rick houses in Kentucky, in the middle of summer can get about 110 degrees, right? And so where it takes a whiskey, at minimum of 3 years in Ireland or Scotland to be called a whiskey, here in the United States, as long as it's been aged for a second, it can be called a bourbon. But generally speaking, most bourbon whiskeys that you'll get will be far less than 10 years old, because the amount of flavor extraction you get out of the wood happens so much faster in the warm, humid climates. Now, Florida, it actually was one of the best producers of rum way back in the day. And so rum is still, the native spirit of Florida. But there are some producers of bourbon now down there that are starting to make a splash.
We have a question from one of the viewers over on Rumble. He's asked, I guess this will probably be directed towards you, Andy. He says, wasn't rye whiskey made so that Americans didn't have to send some extra grain to England? I don't know if you know that or not.
That's what's one of the theories that has been talked about. Because rye was actually first made in Pennsylvania. That's the first known place where it was produced. And then it was also made in Virginia. But it's quite possible. I don't think at least I don't know exactly what the first reason was. But it's good for the story. That's one thing I love about whiskey, is that there's always a good story behind anything you're drinking and you're talking about. And there's probably 2 or 3 different ways to tell that story, but every time it is told, it shares a little bit of information, and we all learn a little something. May not be 100% the truth, but it's close. It's like bourbon. Why is bourbon called bourbon? Was it because of it being produced in Bourbon County, Kentucky? Well, Bourbon County has always been dry, so probably not. Was it because of the Bourbon? Was it because of the Bourbon family in France, where a lot of this material was sent to? Maybe. Or was it because of this whiskey was put into barrels and floated down the Mississippi River all the way to New Orleans and ended up on Bourbon Street? And people used to say, "Hey, give me some of that stuff that we get on Bourbon Street," and that's where I believe the name came from. But
Cool.
I don't know if the story will ever be known for sure.
Yeah, it's like
Speaking of
Paul
rye
Bunyan.
whiskey,
History lesson. That's
Yeah.
great.
It's like
I
Paul
actually
Bunyan or the fish that got away. It was this big. Like, okay, it was this big. Okay.
That's right. Exactly. All right.
I actually
so
had just got a new rye whiskey real quick that I actually first time trying. Angel's Envy finished rye. I just
I love
that's
that
good
stuff.
that one was
Very,
good.
very good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I'm
a
almost
great
out
product.
of the bottle that I have.
So
You
this
haven't-
one, have you poured this one out yet, or have you smelled this one yet?
Yes, and tasted it.
Oh, it's
It's a little
big.
brown sugar, but maybe not.
Yeah, this
Very
is
early.
big.
Yeah.
This is, talk about a Kentucky hug. This one is more like this is a squeeze. Okay.
Mhm.
So you have to let this one, this one needs some time in the glass, because otherwise the alcohol will hit you just really fast. But you get a lot of a dry oak aroma to it, caramel, vanilla, like you get out of bourbons.
And it had a much different like mouth feel to it as well, almost like a sweet texture, like I don't know if it's molasses or whatever, how it's a little bit thicker. And I've had this before, and a little bit of water in it, it just opened it right up, night and day. So this is my favorite one so far.
I think it's interesting. Like each time I drink one of these, it hits differently in my mouth. Like this, I feel this on the back of my tongue, like the back of it for some reason. I don't, and not all of them like that. It's very, noticeable on this one.
There are how many taste buds in the mouth? How many thousand taste buds in the mouth? And they're all in different locations, and they all pick up different flavors. And so that's why you have to spend. The 1792 full proof is probably about an 8.5 to 9-year-old in the cask. So again, you got to have that on your palate for about 9-10 seconds, and to make sure that all the taste buds are activated for this one. I do agree that water is necessary on this one to really open up the flavors. Because when you put water in here, again, I'm getting a lot of almost like you said, molasses, and I was going to say, like, if you were put raisins again or figs in a sweet sauce.
There you go, fig. That it might be the fig type kick to it. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it's crazy the splash of water because the first drink I was like, whew, that was rough. Then I added that water. I'm like, oh, this is actually really good. Like I could keep drinking this one, and I have been.
What is it called? The viscosity? The mouthfeel? The
mouthfeel is actually a good word for it. It is. It has to do with viscosity. It has to do with again, alcohol content. We haven't gone much into things like the legs and so forth that you see coming down the glass, because that has everything to do with the alcohol content, the age of how long it's been in wood. It's when you spin it in the glass and you actually see the legs that come down, the speed in which the legs come down, or the width of the legs. This is what's called the Marangoni effect. And so what happens is you're actually separating the water in the alcohol. And so the water is going to come down slower. And so, but this has a lot to do with mouthfeel. The ones where you can tell in the glass, it's just very oily, very viscous. In the mouth, it's got that same feel. It's almost velvety in the mouth.
Yeah. Creamy is what came in my word, but I thought that was a weird word.
What is that? Velvet? Nice. Excellent. Good pull.
Now, one of the things we haven't talked about yet is the use of ice. And I wanted to wait till we tasted this one in particular, is that a lot of bourbon purists do believe that 1 large cube of ice is the proper way to drink a bourbon whiskey. Again, it's up to whoever paid for the whiskey and whoever's glass it is, honestly. And if somebody's going to pour me a 1792 full proof and say you got to drink it this way, I'll say, yes, ma'am, I'll take, not a problem. Your whiskey. But the reason why so many people drink bourbon over ice is because when you chill down whiskey, you actually close up the flavor profile. And so in some situations, especially the ones that have that real high burn or Kentucky hug, it lessens that. And so it makes the drinking experience more enjoyable for a lot of people, because they don't get that burn. They can sit there and sip on it without having that feeling like you're getting heartburn, but it does reduce the flavor. And so, but if that's the way you like it, that's the way you like it.
Right.
I definitely prefer a little ice.
Mm-hmm.
You pussy. No, I'm kidding.
Whoa. The drinks are kicking in.
That's true. Just
I'm like, oh, I'm going to make a joke.
Wow.
I like pine over ice too.
It must be hot in that room right now.
There are whiskeys that I actually prefer on ice myself. I just think that sometimes, there's
you're
one
not gonna
from
call him a pussy?
Mr. President, I'd like to.
Over ice also.
I'm a guest.
I got to be nice to Andy. He's going to do an in-person tasting for all of us eventually
That's
here.
true.
So
That's true.
Yep. But there's one out of Scotland called Glenlivet, and they produce one called Nadura. It's a cast strength whiskey, and that one for me is my favorite summer whiskey. That on ice with a splash of water and a twist of lemon, it's one of the best drinks I've ever had in my life.
can you pull that up, Will?
Yeah,
Are you-
I'm
Yeah,
gonna write
hold
that
on.
one down.
Yeah.
Um,
What's that one called?
You mentioned with lemon, a little bit of Doors with
Mhm.
lemon.
Yeah.
I think it's called a Gold Rush, and
Okay.
a little bit of lemon, or you can put orange in it. I like it with a little bit of lemon and like you said, like a baller, like a big ice cube.
Yeah.
So nice out by the
So if-
pool or sitting in
Yeah.
the yard or whatever.
And the reason why that works so well is because Dewar's has a little bit of a peaty, smoky flavor to it, and that pairs perfect with citrus. Yeah, if you like Dewar's, you're gonna love our fifth one. It's a
What was the
beast.
whiskey you wanted me to pull up?
Glenlivet Nadura, Nadurra.
Made famous in Anchorman, I'd like 2 fingers of Glenlivet and put some boots on it.
and
All
the-
right, how do you spell that one again? Sorry.
how do you spell Nadura?
Nadurra. Nadura.
Alright.
It's the whiskey. It's
I does, and the only reason, Will, thank you so much, Will, by the way. I'm a visual person, obviously, so like I could look all day long in the store. Of course, I could ask the nice person behind the counter, but like,
There
okay,
we go.
that's really helpful for me because I'm way visual.
that's because you're a designer.
It's 'cause
Wow,
I'm
my
a-
handwriting has changed since we started.
Oh, my word.
I didn't know I was a doctor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I didn't know
I'm
you
gonna
could
walk
write
up here
cursive.
tomorrow. Yeah, I'm gonna come up here tomorrow for auction and be like, "What the hell's all this writing? Who's drawing stick figures?"
Who's Medusa? It said Nadura. Oops.
All right, so that's 1792. That is the quintessential bourbon. That is now just for some kind of 101 points about this. Not so all bourbons are whiskeys. Not all whiskeys are bourbon. I like to remember that. In order to be called a bourbon, it has to be in the United States. It doesn't have to be made in Kentucky, unlike what a lot of people think. It has to be made in the United States, distilled in the United States. It has to be distilled predominantly from 51% corn. The rest of the mash bill can be rye, wheat, any other grain. All right. And then there's other provisions as well. It has to be aged in an unused new charred oak barrel, and it has to be like bottled at a certain proof and so forth. But for the most part, it's all about the corn and the new oak. And so 1792 for me, that was one of my first experiences with like a really good bourbon. I visited the distillery many years ago and just fell in love with this. I like this for drinking either neat, but I really love it in an old fashioned. I think it's perfect for that because that extra alcohol content really pairs well with the other flavors that are in an old fashioned.
Yeah, it doesn't drown them out and all that. So you
Right.
mentioned where they're at in where they're stored and all that. So there's a distillery that's part of the McKinney family who also does Buffalo Trace. Well, they have a bourbon that they've got that is called Benchmark. And it's based on the floor that they call it, and the top floor is supposed to be like their best one, but that just means that it was distilled in the warmest part of the warehouse. Like, oh, okay, cool. I'll take one of each because they're really inexpensive and you can make mixed drinks and so yeah, pretty cool.
And that does make a big difference in the flavor. Top floor is the hottest, but the second top floor, second to the top floor of the rick house is usually where you get your whiskeys that end up in like a Pappy or something like that. And are one of my favorite bourbons, Wild Turkey Rare Breed. So the second to the top floor. So what the Angel share is basically all the alcohol that evaporates out of the barrel as the barrel's breathing in the rick house. That second to the top floor, all the alcohol from the lower floors is going up into that one, and because it's not on the top floor and it doesn't go out through the roof vents, it kind of stays there, and it just percolates in and out of that, breathes in and out of those casks. So you get some amazing flavors out of that product.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Whiskey number 4, and I if I'm going too fast, please let me know. I don't know how much time you have, but
I think we're okay. This is a good pace.
Okay. Whiskey number 4 is absolutely unique. Whiskey number 4 is actually made in the United States, and we talked about before that bourbon is made predominantly from corn. 51% corn. Whiskey number 4 is 98% corn whiskey, 2% malted barley. That malted barley is needed there to get the alcohol, the sugars to start to turn. This particular corn whiskey is made down in Texas, and unlike traditional corn whiskey, which is not aged, this one's been aged for 5 years in an ex-tequila barrel.
Whoa.
This is really good.
I was going to say mesquite. That's interesting.
Blew my mind.
You said tequila. I was thinking mesquite, like the smoky flavor. But now that you said tequila out loud, I'm like, oh, okay, there we go.
This one is close to 69% ABV. This one is going to be absolutely unique. I brought this to a whiskey tasting event about a month ago for some friends, and they're huge bourbon drinkers, Scotch lovers, so forth. I pulled this thing out, and everybody just started like smiling and laughing, because when you've tried so many whiskeys and then you try something that is just completely unlike anything you ever had before, I mean, it's a fun experience.
The nose on this one is ridiculous.
Yeah. And the color on this is really dark, really dark.
Yeah.
And that's because, again, aged 5 years in an old tequila barrel. So it's probably a Reposado tequila. And it was aged in Texas for 5 years.
Yeah, this one hangs out on your tongue for a little while and says, hold up. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait here before I catch my cab. Yeah, this is this is a really good flavor. I added a little bit of water. This one I'm going to keep for when we're done, and drop an ice cube in it and sip on it while I finish up some other stuff I'm doing for tomorrow.
Yeah, this is definitely what we would call a front porch sipper. You don't want to go hard and heavy with this one, but I'm getting on the nose like a caramelized banana smell.
Banana's a good word, because that's what I couldn't put my finger on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow.
You say you wouldn't want to go hard and heavy, but I would try.
It'd be a fun experience.
Pry me away from it, I dare you. This one's making my lips tingle. I'm not kidding.
Ooh,
Oh, God.
What is it, Andy? It's crazy.
Well, again, 69% alcohol. Yep, it's 69% alcohol,
burning,
and I get a lot of lime. Yeah,
just for the record,
I'm getting a lot of lime flavor.
So when we watch this back, if we could just watch Andy from start to finish, he now looks like he was with Angela at the beach, and he is something.
I know, right? I'm giving up. It's the hot studio lights.
It's all those hugs. Yeah.
Did we
too tight?
Did we say the name of this whiskey? I might have missed that.
I did not. And this one you're not going to be able to find online. This one, I'm a member of what's called the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society out of the UK, and they do private bottlings. This one happens to be a private bottling. This is one of only 171 bottles in the world.
Wow.
And this one, it was actually produced by Balcones in Texas. Balcones is definitely one of my favorite American whiskey producers. They do bourbon and they do some rye, but they're really known for their single malts. Absolutely fantastic product. But yeah, so they bought a full cask from Balcones, and then they aged it and bottled it.
That's really cool. Thanks for sharing this with us. This is
This
is a really cool. This one is like a cool experience drink, and you're just like, wow, hey, do you remember that time? Hell yeah, I remember that time. This is really cool.
This is one of those times.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I was trying to hope to make it, memorable. And
Definitely
something
have.
like this, whether you are a whiskey, an aficionado, doesn't matter. I mean, if you just appreciate it, this one is so bizarre compared to all the others.
Mm-hmm.
Completely different.
But that's why I like this in the world of whiskey, because it shows you how different they can be. Whiskey is made on every continent in the world. And so, here in the United States, there's 1,800 distilleries. And in Scotland, there's about 145 now. And so imagine then all over the world. I mean, at any given time, there's about 4,000 different profiles just of Scotch whiskey available for sale. So now look at all the different producers all over the world. I mean, there are tens of thousands of styles, and they're all just a little bit different.
We need to get busy, guys. Just saying. It's a lot.
That one is just superb.
Whiskey.
The Fantasy Sports Corp distillery we'll have one in Wisconsin, and we'll have a little shop down here in Florida.
There you go.
Will, where are you at, Will? Are you in Wisconsin too?
Washington State.
Oh, dang. Coming at you from the
way opposite of where you're at right now.
apple country over here.
Mm-hmm. Eastern Washington.
Whiskey's good for that area too, because it's always cold and rainy, right?
Yeah.
Boy, I could nose this one all night. This is one that I can keep on coming back to.
Totally.
And get another flavor that I didn't get the last time.
It's so good.
It's amazing, and it's definitely a Uber. An Uber whiskey. It's holy cow.
Now,
when
you added
this is 69, so this would be 100. So it'd be 138 or 140 proof. Oof.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. Without a doubt. I mean, so I added water to it, and you know what I'm getting out of it? I'm now starting to get like a Chinese 5-spice out of it. And some tobacco.
Oh, yeah.
This would be good with a really good cigar.
Oh, tobacco.
You got that right.
Because I've got a Russell's 12-year, and when I drink it straight, I'm like, I'm not a fan. But man, if I go out there and have that with a really nice cigar, it's one of my favorite whiskeys. I can just enjoy it while have that cigar. It's the pairing, especially if it's a good Cohiba or something. I don't know what it is, but man, it just changes the profile and it's great. And that's what this one reminds me of, something with a really good cigar.
And that Russell 12-year, if you don't like the fire breathing dragon, that is perfect. If you're just kind of breaking into bourbon, that is like super smooth. Yellowstone also has a bourbon that's like real, like not sweet to where you're gonna pour it on ice cream or anything, but it's got a sweet kind of woody flavor to it. It's really nice. So
I know Andy was saying too that like some of the in-person tastings that you've done pairings with those people who do those specialty chocolates and stuff. That would be an experience.
So we named our company years ago Altered States. And that's because we call this the altered states of whiskey. And so it starts with neat, a drop of water, maybe more water, ice, maybe a mixer, and then pairing with food. And so we do tasting events in person where we'll actually bring food along with. And it is amazing how you can have a whiskey, no matter what it is, and have anything as simple as a potato chip or a pretzel or a peanut or something like that. And all of a sudden you taste things that you've never tasted before out of that whiskey. So it makes sense that a cigar would add a huge flavor profile. It adds a whole new dimension to the whiskey. And this is what I love about tasting whiskey and having these events. And again, being with a group of friends while doing it, because, there's very few things in life, I think, that people can sit down stress-free, really just enjoy and just kind of enjoy the time, taking as much time as you want to, and getting all the flavors out of these whiskeys. For the same people who love going to restaurants and having really high-end foods prepared, to me, whiskey is at that same level, and even more so because I can do it in my house. I don't have to go out.
Yeah.
I don't have to dress up for it.
That's like my
exactly.
coworkers say. Some people get sad because like chocolate cake has calories. I'm like, I get sad because bourbons and whiskeys and scotches and vodkas make you drunk. Like, I just love how it tastes, and I just wish I could drink it all night.
And that's the great thing about Zoom calls too, like this, because now I'm not even wearing pants. I mean, this is great.
Me neither.
Yeah.
Andy, you haven't changed a bit over all these years.
No, not at all.
Fun fact, like Jared's probably seen me in my underwear more than he realizes doing podcasting. I'm always like, crap, how high is the camera? Okay, I'm good. I can get up.
Awkward. Now I have to replace a negative thought with a good thought.
It was the booby. I saw that the other day.
Yeah, my
I
little,
mean, I heard about
my
it.
little
on your
stress ball. Yeah.
podcast.
Yeah.
I'm sitting next to Angela.
Oh, yeah.
What are we? I mean, we're both in black. But
Yeah.
All right. Any questions about the first 4 whiskeys that we've tasted so far?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Any questions about just generally speaking about whiskey or the production or what makes them different? I tried
I
to
do have
interject. Okay, go ahead.
Japanese whiskey. What makes that different than all the other ones?
Was
Because
gonna ask that.
yeah, I love. I mean, for some odd
Inquiring
reason,
minds want to know.
ever since I started, drinking whiskey or whatever, just something always attracted me to the Japanese whiskey. So
I've got a
I don't know
bottle
what
sitting over
about
there.
it.
Yeah.
So that's a good question. So Japanese whiskey was first started back in the early 1920s, I want to say, basically when a guy went to Scotland, learned how to distill, brought it back to Japan, and said, "We're going to do this better." And so, if you've ever had a whiskey called the Yamazaki, Yamazaki is basically like the quintessential original Japanese whiskey. It's produced exactly like Scotch. Okay, malted barley only, no other grains, and very similar production methods. Japanese whiskey, though, over the years has become somewhat adulterated in that many of the Japanese whiskeys that you find in a retail store are actually a blend of whiskeys made in Japan and Scotland, and they don't tell you that. And it's also because it's in Japanese, it's very difficult for most of us to read the label and go, "Oh, this is a malt whiskey," or "This is a grain whiskey," and so they don't do a good job of discerning the different types of grains that they use. So just a couple of years ago, actually, no, maybe about a year ago, Japan decided to create their own, what we have here is called the CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, that dictates exactly what a bourbon needs to be. Japan is doing the same thing, and it essentially exposed a lot of the Japanese distilleries to be not real distilleries. They're just what are called rectifiers, where they buy the whiskey and rebottle it. And so
nice.
what makes Japanese whiskey, though, the good Japanese whiskey is different from Scotch whiskey, is usually the wood that they use. Japanese whiskey, and the really good ones, are actually aged in a Japanese type of oak called a Mizunara cask. And the Mizunara cask is going to give it more of a floral aroma to it. There's also a lot of whiskeys that are made there using rice, kind of like distilling rice wine. And so I mean, it really is, it's a different profile. Some of them are absolutely outstanding, but you just got to be really careful on which ones you get.
Awesome.
With the new regulations that Japan is bringing in, is that going to be similar to how we talk about bottled and bond?
Yeah, it's going to add some of that. I mean, the Code of Federal Regulations here dictates that, any whiskey, any bourbon, you can call it a bourbon if it's 51% corn and it's aged, for a minute or a day, whatever, in new oak. In order to be bottled and bond, it's got to be 4 years, 100 proof, and in bonded warehouses. To be called straight whiskey, it's got to be 2 years old. So there are some, those regulations.
I didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, they're going to make their own in Japan as far as the age. Japan depends on where it comes from. it may take a lot longer to age because of their climate, and so it's more like Scotland. Whereas like we sometimes in these world tour whiskeys we'll do a Taiwanese whiskey called Cavalon, and that's aged for maybe 18 months to 2 years, but that's like dog years, you know. It's like 2 years is like 14 years anywhere else, because it's 98% humidity in the same temperature, so it ages really fast.
I gotta see if my brother can get his hands on any Thai whiskey. He lives in Thailand. Hey, Mike, if you're listening, hook a boy up, man.
Two of us.
Cavalon,
Yeah.
Cavalon, their sherry cask whiskey is absolutely sublime. I mean, it is phenomenal.
Is that readily available, or do you have to be part of a underground presidential committee?
One of 100 bottles.
Yeah. Only 1.5
So
bottles.
it is. I wouldn't call it. Yeah, it's not readily available, but it's going to be at your whiskey stores or liquor stores that have a really good selection. They'll have it.
I think a good tip too is like, I know there's a place outside of town where I work, and they'll get the good stuff from whatever distiller it is that has certain rarities, and sometimes you have to ask for it.
Yeah.
Just be like, hey, did you have like in the back room? Do you wink wink, like handshake? I don't know.
Yeah, we got hooked up with a couple allocated bottles for our boss for Christmas, and then where Jay Tilly and I are at, we couldn't get our hands on Buffalo Trace and one of our guys, he's got a guy, and he just shows up with 2 bottles and a bottle of something else. I'm like, what? Like, what truck did you knock off? Like, dang. So that's really cool. Again, Andy, that number 4 alone was worth the price of admission, and you're the man. Thanks for hooking us up with this so far.
My gosh, you are more than welcome. So you
do this. I'm paying.
So that was definitely
awkward.
Andy, Buffalo Trace, you could
you
could buy it at Costco all the time.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
And you could buy a ton of bottles, and then they limited, and now they don't have it. What happened, Andy?
Well, so here's the thing about the bourbon industry. And I could go on for 2 hours just talking about the bourbon industry, but I will say this. The bourbon industry is impacted by marketing 95%. We have a lot of people in here in the United States that are buying a lot of whiskey.
Showing off his bottle.
There we go. And so as soon as somebody says that, oh, it's a really good whiskey, now all of a sudden you can't find it in there. Bottles like, Pappy Van Winkle, which is essentially a very similar mash bill and made in the same distillery as Buffalo Trace, what makes that one so special is really because of the quality of the cask and where in the rickhouse it's actually aged. All bourbon is made for about the same price. It costs about $4 per proof gallon to make a gallon of new make. But where the cost comes in is how long it's actually in the cask, and how much does it cost to build that barrel, because barrels are not cheap. And again, in the United States, you can only use them once and still call it bourbon whiskey. So I was really fortunate to have a 25-year-old Pappy several years ago. This is a bottle that sold for, when they did sell it at the time, I think it was $20,000 a bottle. And I was so a friend of mine at the time was, he was the retired president of Brown-Forman. He was there in the 80s when he and Lincoln Henderson created or brought back the Woodford Reserve. And eventually Lincoln left and started Angel's Envy with his son, and then my friend Steve retired. But I was in his office several years back, and he started pouring for us 25-year-old Pappy Van Winkle out of a nondescript bottle, had no label on it. He says, well, I did some work for Julian and he paid me in casks. And he said, he said, the problem is I can't sell this stuff because it's not mine. I can't call it Julian. I can't call it Van Winkle or, a Pappy. So, he's I'm not sure what to do with it. So he says, let's just drink it. So we sat in his office for several hours drinking this stuff. He kept on pouring glasses like house pours for us.
Oh,
my
wow.
God, that was good. Best whiskey I ever had in my life.
God, good.
Man. Anyway,
What's a cask amongst friends? Hey.
yeah, right, exactly.
What's a $20,000 bottle of whiskey?
I know. No big deal. And he's like, I've got 400 of these bottles. I'm like, can you please part with one? Can I leave here with one? No, I can't do that. Regulations and such. But we can sit here and drink. Okay, well, I'll stay here as long as you let me.
Don't you have to go to the bathroom while that door's open? Yeah.
That's right. All right, so I'm gonna bring out whiskey number 5. Now, have you had a chance to even put a nose up to this one yet?
No.
Yes.
Very smoky.
Yeah. Okay, so I poured this one particularly for this group because, again, whiskey around the world, and I wanted to show you something different. This is actually a Scotch whiskey. It's a single malt Scotch whiskey. So we're going back to Scotland. The reason why I'm pouring this, the reason why I'm pouring this is because this is this has been touted as the smokiest, peatiest whiskey ever made. Yeah.
Oh man, that smells great.
And so how do we know that? So several years ago, they developed a method to measure what are called smoke phenols, which are the particles from burning peat. So I don't know if you know how when you malt barley, you have to dry it out before it starts to spoil. So they usually just put heat underneath it to dry it out. Well, in the old days, they used to use peat bogs, and they cut peat out of the ground, dry it out, and they burn that to heat their houses. But they also did that to dry the barley. And as it dried, or as the peat burned and it dried the barley, it infused it with this really smoky, vegetal, peaty flavor. And that's why Scotch whiskey, a lot of it is incredibly peaty. Now, this one takes incredibly peaty to a completely different level. If you were to measure whiskeys in parts per million of smoke phenols, I'm getting kind of geeky here, but a Dewar's, we talked about earlier, has a phenol level of about 6 parts per million, 5 or 6 parts per million. This one measures at 198.
Oh my God.
This is delicious. I could drink a bottle of this.
I know, don't you? I
Holy
love
cow.
I'm kind of scared.
This one is so peaty that the peat flavor almost goes away. It's almost, again, like lemon zest.
Right. Or like,
oh my God, I love this one.
Garlic. When garlic is
So
super
good.
powerful, it changes.
So let me read you my notes on this one that I wrote out, so to give everybody an idea of what this is like. And first of all, here's a blurb that somebody wrote first. Not a massive amount of peat, but quite an expressive and wonderful nose. Sooty coals with a little brine, heaps of soy sauce, licorice. The peat is not huge, but it's very dense. Honey glazed ham, fruits, berries. And so that's the nose that most people get out of this. What I got out of it was dried prunes, red fruits, like cranberries, and then spicy baking spices. And then I get like maple bacon out of the nose.
Definitely.
Bacon's a good,
Yeah,
like
bacon, and like this one is the only one that made me feel something on the roof of my mouth, and that's like the whole situation is saying, hey, you may or may not like this, and I'm not sure if I like it or not. I think I got to hang out with it a little bit, get to know it. Maybe take it for a walk. I don't know, but yeah, this one's interesting. Yeah. What's your leg width? Hold on.
You just got some green pepper. That's weird.
I think that's why I'm afraid to try it, because I haven't eaten meat since.
No, there's no meat in it.
It smells like bacon.
It does smell like bacon and ham.
Bacon.
It's really good though.
No bacon was harmed during the production of this whiskey.
Smokiness.
So good.
Taste. This is gonna sound weird, but it tastes like my clothes after I've smoked all day. I know that sounds weird, but that's like when you smell like after I've been smoking a brisket all day.
Like it smells, you mean?
Yeah, like
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
that's what it reminds me of.
So
A good
this
bar.
one is
I need to get a
called
bottle of this.
the Octomore. Octomore is made by the Bruichladdich. It's an Islay whiskey of West Scotland. This is specifically the 8.2 Masterclass bottle. If you find this, it's going to be about $450 to $500 for a bottle.
Let me scratch that off the
Whoa.
list. Hold
Oh,
on.
thank you, Andy.
Never mind.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Put it on
This
your
one,
list.
there we go.
Beautiful.
And there's a bunch of Octomores ranging from, I think it started at 2.1, and then I think they're up to 13.4 now. This one 8.2 I got last time I traveled to Scotland. But so peaty whiskeys are very polarizing for people. If anybody has tasted Scotch whiskey for the first time and they say, I'll never have it again, it tastes peaty. That's probably because they tasted something that had a lot of this flavor to it and it didn't hit them right.
Yeah.
So when I mentioned before, they use the peat to dry the grain after they malt it. It doesn't happen everywhere in Scotland anymore. Most of it is done in the Islay region, which are the islands on the west side of Scotland. The reason why it has this sort of iodine-y, medicinally smell to it, kind of like a Band-Aid-y taste, is because the peat that they harvest in that part of Scotland is made from thousands of years of seaweed coming up on shore and then becoming part of the terroir. And so that becomes part of the peat bog. If you were to take peat from the Highland region, it's going to taste more floral, more heathery because of what is found in that area. So this is what makes Scotch whiskey so unique. If you get peated whiskey from anywhere in Scotland, the peat comes from different locations and it has a completely different profile.
Interesting. Adding the water to this one, I don't like it as much.
Yeah,
Really?
neither do
Really
I.
knocks it down.
Yeah, it just
Yeah.
smells. It just tastes like a regular bourbon when I add the water to it.
Yeah, it
Without the
tastes
water, I
almost
can taste
like-
that smoky and
Yeah.
adding the
It's
water.
It's
I'm
almost
just-
like tobacco and now that you
Yeah.
said the Band-Aid, it's like a tobacco Band-Aid-y
I
Oh,
I just like how
ruined it. Damn it.
I just like how serious Angela gets when she's adding the water in there on stream. She's just very precise.
The little,
We're watching you, Will. You downed yours. We watched you.
You did.
Yes, it was delicious.
Yeah.
Did you love it?
Yeah, it's great.
yeah.
So good.
I think I disagree. I think I like it a little bit with the water added to it, a little bit more.
Okay.
But
I like it
Mr.
with the
Noah.
water.
I like it both ways.
So generally speaking, when you add water to a really heavily peated whiskey, it actually tamps down the peat flavor and it brings more of the barrel notes forward.
Mhm.
And so this particular whiskey was aged in 4 different types of specific wine barrels. Sauternes
wow.
is the main component. So there's a sweetness to it. When you add the water,
Yeah.
see, I'm getting more sweetness now out of the whiskey.
Yeah.
And so if you really like it, that peat smoke bomb, adding water does take that away a little bit, but it turns it into a sweeter profile.
Would ice do the same? I know you said ice kind of brings in the flavoring a little bit, but would ice do something similar to just adding water?
Mhm.
I guess.
Well,
right?
so water, I add water that's always room temperature because again, you don't want to shut down the flavor. You may want to open up the aromas, but you don't want to close it up. So when you cool your whiskey, it's the same thing when you put a bottle of whiskey in the refrigerator or the freezer. It does the exact same thing as ice. It just clamps down on how big that profile is. This is why a lot of whiskey drinkers, if they do want to clamp it down but not alter the flavor, they'll add in what are called whiskey stones, which cools down the whiskey but doesn't add water.
Okay.
Yeah, I added an ice cube to number 4. It's now number 1.
Number 4 was hardcore. Like I still have. Woo! Cha-ching. Yeah.
Angela used to have 10 glasses. Now she has 9.
They're her glasses. I only have like one of these. She's got like a host of them. Don't
Man.
you?
That's
So-
why we're best.
I would say this: when it comes to whiskey drinking, and again, there's a lot of Scotch drinkers that say, I don't like the smoky whiskeys. I don't like the peaty whiskeys. I really like the more sherry cask influence and so forth. It's an acquired taste. I mean, I have met some people, matter of fact, that did a tasting a few years ago, and there was a 20-something-year-old girl in the tasting that had never had whiskey before, and she tasted Lagavulin 16, Nick Offerman's favorite whiskey, from Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec.
Yep. And so she tasted Lagavulin 16. She's like, oh my God, that's the best thing I've ever had. And that is peaty, smoky. That's like this, maybe tamped down a bit. And some others, just repel away from it. But as your flavor profile changes, and so if you've ever had, let's relate this to wine. Most people who start drinking wine usually start with a sweet white. Then they go to a sweet red, and then they go to a dry white, and then they go to a dry red. And so it's a progression. And the same thing is with Scotch whiskey. When I first started my journey about 10 years ago, I did not like peaty, smoky whiskeys at all. I think they all tasted like a Band-Aid. I love peated, smoky whiskeys now. Matter of fact, 8 out of 10 bottles that I buy are going to be peated whiskeys because I love what it adds to the profile.
That's interesting. I know you and I talked about that when we were in the podcast, and I was just about to bring it up, so I'm so glad you talked about it.
How do you drink it, Andy?
How do I drink the whiskey normally?
Peaty.
Well, so actually, peated whiskeys can make a really good mixed drink. You can make, essentially a Manhattan with Scotch is called a Rob Roy, and make that with a smoky whiskey. That's phenomenal. That is really good. Again, adds just another profile to it that you have to try it for yourself. But I prefer my whiskeys either neat, or I do like rocks and water as a mixed drink. A lot of it has to do with the fact that I do a lot of these tasting events, and my liver doesn't like me too much, and I'm drinking nothing but neat whiskeys all the time.
Nice.
Now, I've done some judging on whiskey events before, and when you judge a whiskey, you actually water it down. I mean, it's not just adding water to the whiskey; you're essentially adding whiskey to the water. And in a glass, in a Glencairn glass like this, it would be 1/3 whiskey and 2/3 water.
Wow.
And you do that to take the alcohol out of the equation.
Wow.
So all you're doing is tasting the notes. You're tasting the notes of the barrel, the notes of the grain. If you've ever had new make before, which is basically whiskey that's never been aged, it's got a really funky, sweet, kind of annoying flavor to it. But when you water down a whiskey that much, you get those flavors back, and then you get to see what the distiller was thinking.
Wow.
That's good to know.
It is.
Yeah.
And then one of the more fun things is after the tasting event is done and all the glasses are empty, I invite people to go back to the glasses 1 through 5, and then when they're dry, smell the glass. That glass is going to smell like the essence of what that whiskey was, because now all the water's gone, all the alcohol's gone. You're just left with the phenols. You're left with the the soluble aromas in the glass.
Nice. I love it. This is fabulous.
Right. So
I love this.
Are you guys
We're doing these weekly, right? These are weekly? This is a weekly?
I was
I'd
just
love
gonna
to.
say, could you just
So
every
much fun.
single week? Who said that?
I did.
We can do it bi-annually. We could wait. What does that mean? Once every 2 years, or is that twice a year? What's biannually?
That's twice a year.
Yeah.
Twice a year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we should do this on each of our shows so we can have Andy come on the Triple B and Triple B with A. And,
yeah, you said you had 100 bottles to get through, right? So.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I do. I do. It's just gonna. It's
We're
gonna
just
make
trying to
it a little
help.
more,
We're just trying to help.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. It's a service. I appreciate that. So when I do tasting events, I usually ask people, what's your favorite whiskey? and I try to pair whiskeys around that one that you love, but with completely different names and styles that you would never think of, right? The whole idea of this is, back when Frank and I started this business of doing whiskey tasting events, it was all because we love sharing whiskey with friends, and we also wanted to expand people's palates. All too often we go into a restaurant or a bar or a liquor store and we get the exact same bottle because that's what we know. What
Right.
happens if you go to a restaurant and you really wanted a glass of whatever your favorite whiskey is and they don't have it? What do you reach for? You know, there's so many thousands of bottles of whiskey around. How do you know what you're going to like? And so what I try to do is pair the other whiskeys to be of the same profile, but expanded a bit so that you know, well, if they don't have this, I could probably get that and I'll really like it.
Nice. That's awesome.
So, you know, if you ever want to do this again, you say, here's my favorite whiskey, and you can tell me I'm really adventurous, I'm not very adventurous at all, and then we can pair 5 whiskeys or pour 5 whiskeys that give you a little bit of what you really love, but expands your horizons a bit.
And it's so interesting because there's so much out there that really, you know, you could pick and choose different factions and of this whole world of whiskey. You could be like, hey, we're going to just try some Japanese stuff. Hey, we're just gonna, right? Stick to the peats. So cool.
Yeah, I had somebody come to me and say, I want nothing but peated whiskeys made in the Highlands. And which is, there's not many, you know, out of 145 distilleries, there's only a handful in the Highlands that do peated whiskeys. We got it done. We were able to do it. It was a lot of fun. But you know, it's so if somebody says, give me 5 whiskeys that are use port wine as a secondary finishing cask, we can do it. And because it all meets that same profile that you like.
That's super cool. I'm so excited. This was amazing.
That's why you're the best, Andy.
Andy's the best.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We are going to do an in-person event in Wisconsin, probably in the fall. I'm just saying, if you guys want to make the trip, you're welcome to. Or whoever's watching, actually, it's like, it'll be a first come, first serve thing. So got a couple people on the list already, but if anybody's interested, you have to let me know.
What wrestling events are going on in Wisconsin, Jared?
I don't know. We're gonna have to find one. They're getting ready to do the draft next year in Green Bay, so we may have to road trip.
That's happening.
There we go.
Definitely happening.
Excellent.
Yay! Awesome. I'm so happy that you were able to join us.
Can I ask what everybody's favorites were?
Absolutely, my pleasure.
I'm just curious what everybody's favorites were.
Oh gosh.
Mine was number 1 and number 5.
2 and 1 for
Really?
me.
I liked 4 and 5.
Yeah, 4 was my number 1, hands down, and it was even better with an ice cube.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, 4 is just, you know, corn whiskey aged for 5 years in an ex tequila cask. I mean, that is so bizarre, but it works. It absolutely works.
Awesome. It set your mouth on this whole experience, kind of like what Angela was talking about. Like, oh, wait a minute, is this in my ear? Is this in my heart? What's going on? That was pretty cool. I appreciate that one for sure.
For me, I still have a little bit of 4 and 5. I mean, 4 was holy schmoly, like
wild.
It's once we like cut camera, it's good. It's going, but so good. So good.
Well, that makes sense for the 2 highest proofs in the group. And so, but it would be good, again, try them with a little bit of water or maybe just 1 small ice cube to cool it down. Yeah, I mean, it's just so much fun to do these with a group of people that really appreciate the different various flavors. So, I mean, thank you so much for hosting this.
Oh my gosh.
No,
thank you.
Oh, so we're so lucky to have you. It was amazing. It's really amazing. Seriously. You're the best.
You know, and
And
I want
everybody learned a little something. Anybody
I
who's
was say
Absolutely.
the history that we were taught
Nice.
tonight. That was great.
yeah,
man,
totally.
whiskey and knowledge.
Yeah. So
It's great.
if anybody has questions for you, Andy, can you tell us where you can be found? Can you tell the boys and girls?
Yep. So I have a website. It's called justawedram.com. And
Cool.
on there you can actually send me an email as well. My email address is mortlach, MORTLACHLVR @gmail.com. That stands for Mortlach Lover. That happens to be my favorite whiskey of all time. There's a distillery called Mortlach.
Is this your website?
Hey,
That's it.
All right, there you go.
Yes, sir.
Will's the best.
Well, you are.
For the visual people out there, you know, all right? You just want to come
That's
back to the
right.
stream to see what was that site? Oh, there it is. Boom.
It's
I'm on the right
fantastic.
one.
Will is a podcast. So Will is a podcaster, and so is JT and
Mhm.
Ellie Jayer. Will, can you tell the boys and girls where to find you?
Oh, you can find me. I think I've migrated and made my new home over on Rumble. So you go to Rumble and look for Game On Show. I'm over there. But everything that I'm on and everything that I do, I post over on my locals page at gameon.locals.com. So you can find me there as well. If you're into sports and you like making money off sports, well, my channel's the channel for you.
Absolutely. And what about you guys? We have a little bit of wrestling. If you guys didn't notice all the wrestling references that were made tonight, there's a reason for it. So, guys, why don't you plug your show?
Yeah, so we're the No Shave Man Cave. You can find us wherever you get your podcast from. We're also on YouTube, Rumble. The socials are Twitter, Instagram, all the good places. No Shave Man Cave. Made it real easy.
Yeah, you
So.
guys did it right. That's awesome. Fabu.
No website yet, though. We need to work on that.
You'll get there. You're overrated. And of course, I'm on the fan bus, right? And part of Patriot Sports Radio. So we're all one big happy. We do a lot of collaborations together, actually, all of us podcasters, which is super cool. We're just one big happy family, which is awesome. So we're gonna do this again sometime, you guys?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I would say yes.
Awesome. I think so too.
You know, yeah, Angela, you said earlier on that you and I we're both in the interior design space. It's interesting. This is just my hobby. I do this for fun. So, after 5 o'clock, this is my fun. During the day, I'm actually an architectural building consultant. And so I work on new home projects across the country, specifically building and remodeling or building and designing healthy homes for people with extreme chemical sensitivities, allergies, and asthma. So it's a complete departure from whiskey. But,
right.
This is what keeps me sane right here.
I love it. So awesome.
I think they go hand in hand, Andy.
Right.
I mean, we agree. Like, we like sustainable design as well, and then we
Indeed.
love bourbon and whiskey.
Yes.
See, it works. We make it work.
Cool. All right, guys. I think we can sign off, right? I'm getting a little toasty. I'm just saying. We're gonna end the broadcast now.
Well, I'd say
I think
safe driving, but everybody's at home, so this is great.
Yeah.
This is
I think
perfect.
this is my stop right here.
I might Uber.
All right. Peace out.